This is Ray with School of Racing Graphics, and welcome to Feedback Friday, or really it seems like it's feedback any day these days. And so I've had a lot of problems with my internet. I live out in the country. Our internet is basically held together by a rubber band and a Band-Aid, so I always just try to make the best of it. I'd prefer to do these videos live, but I just can't because the stream always breaks. So for now, I'm going to be recording them until I get a different internet provider and then just uploading them onto YouTube. So what we're going to do is go through this layout, critique it, fix some things, make the sponsors and numbers more readable. It's never really my goal in these videos on the Feedback Fridays to get really creative and create something completely different. I want to stick with the parameters that the designer had originally come up with, or the design that the designer originally came up with, without making wholesale changes to it. So really my goal in these videos is to go through, edit each piece to make it as functional as possible and put it in the best possible scenario it can be in to be readable and functional, as also so that the design looks nice. So I'm just going to take this driver's side here. This is from Bryce Weldon. He submitted it on the School of Racing Graphics Facebook group, where we feedback on layouts, or we give feedback on layouts. And so we got a community there. If you bring your designs over there and post them and ask for feedback, we'll critique each piece without being overly critical or mean, but actually try to help you become a better designer. So I'm just going to make a duplicate here of what Bryce had created. A couple of observations that I noticed right away on this design is there's a lot of mid-tones. So there's not a lot of real dark colors in contrast to real light colors. You got white, and then a lighter gray, then like a magenta and a really light blue. And so this car really lands on the lighter end of colors. Now we do have some dark blue in there, which helps create some contrast. And so we're just going to pick each piece apart and see if we can make these numbers and sponsors pop off the car the best that we can. I'm going to show you his original, the original that he submitted here. I just took a screenshot of it. So he had a couple little things, and some of the feedback that I had given him is that the sponsors were basically too blocked out. You got too much going on here with these sponsors. They almost look like they had to have a background painted behind them in order for them to be readable. So I gave him that feedback, and it looks like he started to strip it down. I'm going to strip it down further, and we'll go from there. Let me close a few things here. There we go. Forgot I had those open. All right, so I like to always start off with the number, especially on these dirt cars, dirt modifieds, dirt late models, sprint cars. The number is kind of like the centerpiece of the wrap design. If you get that right, the rest of your design, even if it's not done well, the number being done well will go a long way in carrying the rest of the design. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strip it all down. So let me release the clipping mask he's got here. And for now, I'm going to go ahead and just delete this out. We'll add it back in later after I work through the graphic. But I always like to start with the number. And I'm going to leave his copy over here so we can reference it a few times and just talk about the differences in what we're doing and how we're thinking through the design. So let's take the 79 for now, and I just want to get back down to base, meaning just the original number structure, no additional pieces to it. Okay, so the first thing that I notice is how close together the 7 and the 9 are, and this is kind of a critical mistake that a lot of designers make. Your spacing on your numbers and sponsors is incredibly important, and going through and being meticulous on that point is going to go a long way when you begin to put outlines, drop shadows, and things on your numbers. And so always pay attention to what you got going here. So I'm not going to be working in in standard size or the full size of the wrap. This is actually scaled way down. And so I'm going to be working in pixels. So this is going to be a little bit of a guesswork. Usually if I'm working in a full size wrap, I work in increments, 1 inch increments. And so, or I can divide anything into an inch. So 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, full inch, 2 inch, as far as my outlines and strokes go. And so that I'm always, when I'm building it, I always know the math in my head as to how thick something is, because the more often that you do that, the more used to you get when you're at the track and you see it on the car, you realize what works and what doesn't. And so you begin to realize, oh, a 1/2 inch inset outline actually works really well in specific scenarios. And so your eye gets trained to see those things. So basically, though, what I'm doing here, because I'm not working in full-size wrap, I'm going to be working in pixels. I'm going to do a lot by eye, but the principles are still the same. We're trying to get this thing to be readable and still keep all the colors and maintain some kind of quality going throughout the wrap. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ungroup these because we need to get these split apart. There needs to just be a little bit more space in between them. So I'm going to break them apart. I'm going to hide that texture for now, just so I don't keep grabbing it. And then I'm going to ungroup it. There's probably going to be a little shape in here. Yep. Go ahead and delete that. And then I'm just going to put a little space here. Again, I'm going to eyeball it, but I want to give a nice cushion in there that makes whatever we put in here create a lot of contrast between the 7 and the 9. And it looks like he did adjust the number to follow the rake on this template, which is good. You should always follow whatever rake is on the car, especially sponsors and numbers should always follow that top line of the car if you want it to look natural. Anytime you get this weirdness going on where it's like the space increases from top of the number to the top of the car, it's really noticeable. It's offensive to the eye. So I'll bring it up here and I'm going to adjust it just a little bit more. Now usually, again, when I'm working on a full-size car, I don't make those adjustments unless I have a number that I've already created that's actually straight up and down without being adjusted to the rake, so I can always get back to it. In an Illustrator, there's a way to rotate and have it be an effect rather than a final adjustment. So it's a non-destructive workflow. So I can always get back to 0 on the rotation if I need to. You can do that under effects. It's under one of these options here, distort and transform. I always forget this menu has a lot of stuff in it. It's in here somewhere. My point really isn't to get to that right now. Maybe we'll find that later. But we are going to go through this menu quite a bit today, working on the effects for the number. So I'm going to go ahead, bring these two back together as one component in the Pathfinder, and it's just called Unite. And then I always say make compound shape and expand it, and it's all together now as one piece. And we've opened that up quite a bit. And so I'm going to anticipate my thickest outline is going to be whatever that gap is typically there. So in between the numbers. So I'm going to start. The first thing I noticed too about the number is you got this drop shadow, but then you have a light color in the drop shadow. And this color here competes with this color here. And also the white. So you got, this is what I call like a contrast sandwich. I say this a lot in the comments when I'm critiquing wrap designs. And so you got kind of a mid to really light to dark to mid to dark to mid. And so there's a lot of competition going on here for contrast. And so we want to clean that up in a way so that this pink 7 and 9 are the most readable, or the thing that pops out most when you're looking at it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create my first effect on the 79, and I'm going to draw your attention to the appearance panel over here. You see it. This is where all the changes will be. So if I need to make any adjustments, none of my effects are final. I can double click them in here and change my increments around. So I'm going to go to Effect, Path, Offset Path. And by going to Effect and doing that, it makes it an effect instead. And I want it to make sure that I have the pink selected, okay? And actually, you want to duplicate it. So you're going to have 2, and I'm going to create my dark blue outline. Okay, so you don't see it yet because they're stacked on top of each other. So we have 2 fills stacked on top of each other, the 7 and the 9. All right, if I was to turn the pink off, you'll see the blue. There you go. So we want to offset this one. And so we're going to go to, let's see, Effect, Path, Offset Path. And I'm just going to type 2 pixels in for now and kind of guess, preview that. Okay, so you can see here, my gap here is pretty thick in comparison to the outline. So I might want to bump this up because I want it to be consistent. Like that. And let's try 3 pixels. 3 pixels. Like that. So you can see that's nice and thick. It looks pretty consistent through here. I could probably close that up just a little bit. I tend to not close it up. I usually open it more. But I like whatever the outline is here to be consistent between my numbers. That's what's going to create a nice readable number. So I'm going to move this over just a little bit. You can see if I was really going to be picky, I would grab this and drag it over here until I had moved this till it's exactly the same. And that's how I operate whenever I'm actually working on a wrap design. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and set my white outline. So like I said, I'm not here to be super creative with the wrap design. I'm wanting to make it as functional as possible with the elements that he used. So I'm going to try to use the same structure as much as possible. Now, one of the mistakes that I see here on this 7-9 is that the white outline is set to the outside on a fluorescent color. I'm assuming it's going to be a fluorescent pink, that these will be overlays. And so, and maybe not. It looks like he's got a drop shadow in there, so maybe he's going to overlay the fluorescent and then overlay a darker pink vinyl on top of that. Maybe not. But either way, when you're using a mid-tone and then you set white to the outside of it, when I say mid-tone, I mean kind of, it's not super dark, it's not super light, it's kind of middle of the road on color. The saturation of it is, that is. And then you set white to the outside, it kind of blobs it. It turns it into a bit of a blob. Now, if the number was black, dark gray, dark blue, dark red, any dark color, then white to the outside is probably going to be fine, depending on the stroke width or the width of the white. But because this is kind of more of a mid-tone and it's potentially even going to be fluorescent, it's better to set it to the inside and keep the crispness of the number. Otherwise, it begins to look blobby because it's hard to differentiate where the white ends and the pink begins, especially when the car's on the track moving. And so things start to blend together. So it's really important that we don't compromise the original shape of the number here on the very outside. We don't want to extend them into each other and have them touching. Because right here, it looks like even though the white is separating the 7 and the 9, it actually looks like the 7 and 9 are touching, which is not good. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my fill. And so again, now I have 2 pinks on top of each other. And this one I'm going to turn white so that when I adjust this one, the white will show through. So I'm going to go to Effect, Path, Offset Path, and we're going to go -1 pixel. See how that looks. And I think I want to go just a touch thicker, so we're going to go 1.5 like that. Oop. -1.5 pixels. Okay, like that. And then click OK. So click OK. So now you can see here, there's something I really don't like that's happening, and it's how this point is going to end up being out of control. And this is going to be a project by project basis. Like every font and every number set doesn't work in every scenario, meaning you have to make it an adjustment, and it's okay to make those adjustments to make things look normal. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to my offset path that I just put on that pink, and I'm going to crank the miter limit up to 100. And that's going to take the straight cutoff on the corner out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and preview that, and you can see now it kind of puts the point up. But I still don't like that point looks so intense. It's just kind of really drawing attention. It looks slightly out of control. So I'm going to make some adjustments to this 7 here to get that a little bit more under control. So I'm going to ditch that and ditch that. And then I'm going to bring some roundness back in here like so. And you can see that's still pretty bad. But now that I got rid of those other points, I can make those adjustments pretty easily. And just small tweaks. You can kind of see there. kind of just brings it in and makes it look a little more normal and a little less extreme. I just don't like my points going everywhere and being out of control. Okay, so far we got pretty solid piece here with the 7 and 9, but there's still things that we could do to make it stand out even more. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ditch now adjusting this specific set anymore. I may come back to it in a bit, but I'm going to actually go ahead and duplicate it. So I'm going to find it in my layer panel like that. And on this one here, because I did effect offset path, now when I go to object, expand appearance, it'll just take all the shapes and make it into shapes that can be vinyl cut really easily. So like if I ungroup it, now I have all those pieces like that, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those, put them back where they were, and I'm going to bring them all underneath. And so they'll be but below the 79, and it's just one shape now because I brought them all together, but I want it to be a drop shadow. And I'm just eyeballing it, and I'm using the nudge tool, so I nudged over 3 times. Maybe I did more than that. Let's see. So I'm going to nudge over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. I like it to look consistent on both ends. And I'm going to bring that like that as far as the top and the bottom should look somewhat like a, you know, consistent. The same space here as there is here. It's pretty close. I probably could maneuver it a little bit more. But I'll leave it as is for now. So now what I want to do is I want to mimic what he's got going on here. I don't actually like that the color here is so intense, especially coming down into the blue of the graphic. It actually creates less contrast, and it's actually just making all of this blend together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what he has here first, and then I'll make some adjustments. That. And I actually prefer that if we're going to do this and we're going to fade the drop shadow, that we fade it from dark to light so that it's at the top. So because then it's not running through the blue and it creates more contrast through the blue that's in the graphic. Okay, so what I'm going to do is keep adjusting this just a little bit. And you can see we don't need a lot to have the effect. And I actually made another lighter blue color, or not a light, it's lighter than the dark blue, but it's not as light as the light blue. And so I'm going to scoot that to the top. And now you can see we've added the subtle, the subtle detail. And that's really what we're after. We're not after creating some huge detail that really jumps off. Anytime you're working in details, the more subtle, the better. They're still there, but they're not taking away from your original build and what you've got going on within your number and your sponsors, right? So we don't want to take away from the readability, but we want to add the detail just so that it's, you know, it's got a little more dynamic to it, a little bit more texture to it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm now off this build here. I call this a build, meaning I've got my pieces here. Okay, and now I'm on this build. This is a separate build. Now I would have put the drop shadow in this build, but you can't fade in Illustrator a gradient in a drop shadow if it's an effect. And so we had to create a brand new shape to do that. Okay, so now what I want to do is go ahead and create another outline. So I'm going to go to yeah, I'm going to duplicate that. And on this one, I'm going to offset it. So I'm going to add path, offset path, and I'm going to go negative 0.5 pixels. And you can't see it because the two fills are the same, but I'm going to adjust this one here. So I'm going to go ahead and move this down just a little bit. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it on this one. Move this down just a little bit. And you can see it gives it a little bit of a kiss of an outline. You can probably hardly even see it. And we're going to increase it here in just a second. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that light blue back in like that. And so now you can see just here at the top, you got that little bit of light blue, and we're not overdoing it with the blue. We're just bringing it in so that it's a part of the design. So we get back to our original colors that were being used. Okay. And I think I might do the same thing here. I'm going to take this guy here. I'm going to duplicate him on the first build, and I'm going to go ahead and take that same gradient that's right here. I'm going to drop it here into the palette. I'm going to delete everything we don't need. Select all unused. So they're gone. Okay, and then I'm going to place that gradient on this build here. And then we'll take the offset path here, and we're going to pull it back just a little bit. So I can't remember, what did I do? 2.5 pixels. I'm going to do 2.2, no, 2 pixels. See how that looks. No, 2.5. Like that. Okay. And then we'll go down to the one that we just put it on, and I'm going to bring it up to a 90 degrees so it goes top to bottom. And so now you got the light going right up to the top there. And now you can see these two strokes, they're working together in tandem. Brings a little bit of detail into the number, but notice I didn't bring so much in that now I'm like jerking your eye back out here. It's just a nice little detail added into the number, but it doesn't make your eye look at a place that it doesn't belong. So like if I did this is all, now it's starting to create problems, right? My eye is being pulled out here, and I don't really want that. I still want that blue, so I pulled it in across the top where it blends in really well to that gray, but I didn't bring it down here into the middle of this heavily dark area. So you got to think those things through. Thickness and the color have a lot to do with it. I want you to notice also too that none of my strokes are the same width. When you create strokes that are the same width, it's hard for your eye to differentiate what are you being drawn into. And so you want to make sure that your strokes are not, like if this white was the same as this blue, they would be wrestling with each other. And so the dark blue is dominant because it's what's creating the most readability on the number. The white is actually complementing the pink and creating a lot of contrast between the blue while not sacrificing the overall shape of the number. So you just have to think things through like that. So I'm going to back that down, bring that back in, and now we probably have the liberty on this build to bring a little bit of that light blue color in at the very top, like that. Just experiment. I may not like it. I might not want to keep it, but I would like to play with it a little just to see if it works. And I think it kind of does. Kind of gives it a little bit of a rounded effect, like lights coming in. And I don't necessarily want to create that because then I have to, make a drop shadow that looks like lights hitting the back of it. So I think I'll just leave it the way we had it. But I can take this, come back down here, and drag this guy and bring some of that blue back down through here. And this one here is coming down too far. I don't want it to come down that far. So I'm going to drag this up, kind of get rid of some of that lighter color that's going throughout the number. And now you can see we got some really nice subtle details in our number that will show up in the pits, may show up on the track, may not. Not always important that the details show up on the track. The important thing is they see this white, the pink, the dark blue. Everything else is just there as support. Isn't necessary, but does help make the wrap design look nice. Okay, so now we have those two components done. You can see I faded it up, got the same effect, a lot more subtle, not so intense. Okay, so I'm going to grab both of these things, and now I'm going to group them together like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and let's see if we can, I don't know if I can even do this. Add a new stroke. Nope, ain't doing that. So I'm going to group them together, and then I'm going to make a copy over here. And I'm just holding down the Option key on my keyboard. Could be the Alt key if you're on PC. And I'm going to drag and drop it. So now I have two numbers stacked on top of each other. You can see that there. And on this one here, it's grouped together. I'm going to expand the appearance. So now I have all that together, and then I'm just going to combine it. So now I have that entire shape like that. I better give it a fill so you can see what I'm doing here. I'll just color it yellow for now. Okay, so you can see there. And what that's going to do is allow me to put my final outline on it, which is that light gray that he has around the number. Again, I wanted to go around the first build and the second build, and so I created the third shape so that I could do that. Okay, and on this one, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to fill it the dark blue color. Actually, I don't even need to do that. I could just do the light gray. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to Effect, Path, Offset Path, and we'll just do 1 pixel for now, see how that looks. You can see there. Might be a little too thick. Let's take a look. Let's take a look what we got. No, it actually looks okay, but it is creating too much contrast. So that gray color there it's too bright. I don't mind the line being there. I don't want it to create so much contrast that it almost looks like it's competing with the white, right? So I'm gonna go ahead, double click that, hit grayscale, darken it up a little bit, just enough so that it's like feathered into the design, but not dominant, right? So something more like that, okay? And now it kind of pops off the design, separates it from the graphic a little bit. You can see we got some pretty decent details all throughout the number. Okay, so now he's got this little inner shadow here. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna duplicate. I'm gonna unlock everything, and I'm gonna duplicate the 7 and the 9. I'm gonna ungroup it first. So just the pink part here. I'm gonna duplicate this guy. And let's see. Just like that. And I'm gonna clear the appearance, so all I have is the pink. Or I have nothing now, and now it's just an empty, right? Oop. Yeah, clear the appearance. And I'm going to turn it a different color just so I can see what I'm working on here, okay? And so I'm going to go, this I'm not going to do with effects because we're going to be knocking things out. So I'm going to go to Object, Path, Offset Path, and I'm going to go -2 pixels. See where that lands us. I think I actually need to go -2.5 pixels, okay? Like that. And that created a duplicate. I don't need that. And you can see now it's creating that separation that's going to be between our drop shadow that's inside the number and the pink and the white, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and just, again, hold down Alt, drag, and I'm doing it by eye. I typically don't do that. Particularly, I'm usually very meticulous about that. I like everything to be measured precisely. But again, if I sit here and do that throughout the video, it'll be a long, long video. So I'm going to go ahead and knock that out. And now I've got my inner shadow there. And this is another mistake I see. I'll just cover it while we're here. That I see a lot of designers make is they put their inner shadow as like some random color that just, again, creates unnecessary contrast for the car, making it really hard to read and difficult to differentiate. So if I left that yellow, which I've seen things like this, like yellow inner shadow on a red number, sometimes it looks nice. It just depends on the build. Depends on the car, depends on the color of the car. But in this case, it looks like crap. So obviously don't ever do that in a scenario where a car is mid-tones, such like this one, or the saturation values are all kind of the same. All right, so I'm going to actually, that's a little too thick for me. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to thin it up just a little bit. Again, we're creating subtle details. These are not the details that make the number readable. These are the details that make the number look like we took the time to make it look good. Okay, so I'm going to bring that together. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to actually do this. Like, the temptation is to do that and leave it, which I'm okay with that. That's fine. It's kind of dark. It's a little bit hard to, it's a little bit of a contrast sandwich, but not horrible. But I'm going to actually take that. I'm going to drag it down here into the gradient, and gradients work wonders. That's why I like using them. It's like subtle details that really help things stand out, but they don't overdo it. Okay, like that. And so now you can see I kind of faded it, but let's fade it the other way. So -90. Like so. Because if our light's coming from the top down, then the inner shadow would be closer to the top and light would be hitting the bottom of the number. And so you can see it fades out there real nice. It's a nice subtle detail added in. And I can adjust this more or less depending on how much I want in there. Like that. So now I'm going to take all of these pieces here, and I'm just going to group them all together so they're all one piece. The other thing that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of is on this design is how much space he's got between the top of the door and the number, and then how far back the number is on the door. I think this is a kind of car where you're going to want this number a little bit closer to the center. Single digit numbers, some numbers just don't look right when they're back here. I can't tell you why, it just doesn't look right. Okay, so in this case, I feel like the number looks better being in the center of the door, and just working that way. Right now, everything kind of looks pushed back. We got a lot of empty space up here. We'll adjust the sponsor so that's not the case. But for now, I like my numbers to be large and in charge. They are the centerpiece. They're the focal point, and everything else kind of supports them. So I'm going to bring the number up closer to the middle. We've already adjusted the rake, and I could probably size it down just a little bit. You can see the bottom of the car there. And sometimes I get, it depends, not always. I don't always do this, but like you can see the rake adjustments also at the bottom here. And so you can adjust that using, there's a tool here. Let's do this. They've updated Illustrator recently, and the tool, I don't know why, but they don't have like the little drop down, like the free transform tool used to be super easy to find. There, is that it? I think that's it. No, that's not it. Or maybe it is. Or did they get rid of it? I used to even know like there it is. Okay, E. Just hit E and then free distort. So it's after you get the free transform tool open, then that pops up. Then you have this, which allows you to make adjustments to one corner of whatever you're designing. Okay, and so sometimes I might want the bottom of the car and the top of the car to match on the number. So I'd bring a guide down. I don't always do this. This is not like required, and it can make your number look weird as well. So you kind of got to be careful what you're doing, but just kind of make that adjustment so that everything follows correctly. It can end up making the front number look too small, and sometimes I won't follow the bottom of the door, but I won't also follow the rake either at the top, and I'll split the difference. So there'll still be a small slant down here, but it's not as much as what's at the top. Okay. So something like that kind of just helps it a little bit along. And I also, I don't know what his skew angle is here, but I'm going to pop 5 more on that, and just make it a little bit more aggressive. And again, you can go overboard. I mean, look at Russ Wheeler's car from Days of Thunder. I think that thing is like 45 degrees, if not more. It's intense. And so, people say don't go over 25. I do 35 a lot. Just do whatever works for the design. Single digit numbers skew better than double digits. So don't overdo your double digit numbers. Okay, so there we go. All right, so I'm going to move on from the number. I think that's pretty good. It's a pretty readable number. And I'm going to start moving into the sponsors. Before I do that, though, there's something about this that's bothering me. I'm going to ditch the drop shadow that's on here. I don't typically like to use soft drop shadows. They just add to the file size. And they typically, unless they're done like in a specific way, they don't typically look good. So I'm going to come back. We'll make some adjustments to this graphic, but for now, I just wanted to get rid of that. Okay, so now let's draw some attention to the sponsors here and what we can do to make them look better. Again, it's going to be a lot of the same principles that we had with the number. We got to pay attention to what we're doing before we start building our strokes and drop shadows out. Okay. Sorry, I keep moving that. All right, so I'm going to take this guy here and I'm going to actually make a copy just so we know what we're working from and then working into. Okay. I'm not going to spend as much time on this sponsor as I did on the next on the rear quarter panel sponsor. So I'm just going to go through this one a little bit quicker. Couple of different things. When you got a solid color in the background, you could do less. You don't need to do as much on your sponsors because you're not cutting through. Like strokes, drop shadows, outlines, all that kind of stuff is really meant to cut through a busy background. That's the point of them, is they give a function. So if you got a lot of graphics going on and you're like, I can't just put a one color number on that, it won't stand out. That's when you start adding strokes and drop shadows. So, but now we have this one color background. And so depending on the logo, you could really just leave it one color. Now, in this particular instance, I don't think it works because let me see here. It won't match the rest of the build of the car. So we built the 79 to cut through the graphic. And so then to like have these, I call it the dry look, to have these sponsors, to not really match the brand that you already have rolling through the car. I don't think that it really will help the design. You could do that. This is actually far more readable than what this was before. You could see it. And there's things we could do to even fix it up more. But I think I would want to implement the brand that we've established with the colors and outlines and drop shadows. So it's like, if I'm going to do the dry look like this, I typically want to commit to it all the way through the wrap, like on the back, on the number, on the sponsors and everything. So if I'm going to have a number that looks like this, I've got to do something over here that it at least looks like it's attempting to go with, that part of the car. So the first thing I'm going to point out is that you have to pay attention to your spacing before you start doing anything. And so this is mostly difficult to read because it looks like the font has been squeezed in. The width of it has been squeezed in. And it may not have been. This might be the font. But know this, like if you download fonts from defont.com or any other place that says free font, they're free for a reason. They're not legitimate in the sense of, like, a letterhead probably didn't build them. It's probably, I shouldn't say that. There's some letterheads on there that are building fonts, but a lot of the free fonts are just slapped together to work, or duplicates of another font slightly condensed, things like that. So, in that case, you're going to find this kind of stuff, that fonts that look like this. And so we need to spread this guy out back by eye and give it a little bit of room to breathe. It's just way too squished in. It's still squished in there, but I don't want to like overdo it. Okay. And then I'm going to ungroup all of this. I'm going to release it so I can grab each piece. I'm going to lock the background here. And then what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to leave that space there, but I'm going to distribute space evenly. And so that'll put an even amount of space between each letter and really help each letter to breathe a little bit more. We could probably get rid of some of the gap there, because the more you close this gap up, the smaller the gaps will be when we distribute evenly. So I'll do that. But you can see now that gives it just a little bit more space. And then I'll take CJ's and I'll pull it back like that and put that space back in, but not as big of a space as I had. I'm going to eyeball this in here. So I'm always wanting to make those types of tweaks. I'm not, even a font, like you could download a font and it could be right out of the box, you're typing with it and the spacing's wrong. Keep an eye on that. You need to, as a designer, it's your responsibility to fix that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and bring all that back together. Okay. And because of the nature of this particular logo, how it's small, I actually think white would be better, and then decorate it or put the details on it using all the other colors so that the white stands out. We can follow the dark drop shadow. But because of how small this is and it doesn't have thick, meaty letters, and it's not a thick, meaty logo, if I turn the letters pink and then do white outlines on them, you can see it adds a ton of stuff in there, right? And that just makes it hard to read. And so the white would actually be, I think, in this instance, the preference, but we'll experiment. So you put the white on there, and then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my fill, and I'm going to turn the back one the pink color, and then I'm going to offset the white one. And we're just going to go like, you don't have to do a lot because we're just bringing the pink in for the brand. We're not bringing it in for any other reason except to keep consistency. So it doesn't have to be super thick. So we're going to go path, offset path, and then let's try negative 0.5 pixels. And so you can see there, if the pink here started to touch, like they were touching here, here, and over here, then I would probably adjust my width. But because it doesn't, I actually kind of like the way that it looks. It did thin out the letters just a little bit, which is okay. But if they were touching, if the pink was started touching in any of the spots, touching together, I would make an adjustment and make it even smaller. But this brings the pink in. So now what we have to do is we have to create a lot of contrast. And the way to do that is to use our darkest color, which is the blue. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my pink fill. And I'm going to go ahead and say Effect, Path, Offset Path, and let's see, 2 pixels. What's that do? It's too thick. So we'll go 1.5 pixels like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then we're going to go ahead and set the dark blue on there, like so. So now you can see, got a lot of nice contrast in there. We're still going to work on this thing, make it even better. But you can see the contrast and how it's shaping up to be a nice and readable sponsor. So now when you zoom out, and you look at this one here, you can see it's squished together. There's no gaps between the letters, hard to read, hard to differentiate. But when you look at this one here, you can see it clearly says CJ's Threads. Now, my preference on sponsors like this, if I have control and I'm allowed to do what I want, be creative, I would want to break this up with some contrast in shapes. So contrast isn't only in colors, it's also in shapes. So I might want to make a big CJ's with a brush stroke, anything that's brush font, and then have treads come off of that and then run this underneath it. And it just kind of breaks all the shapes up, makes it look less blocky. I don't know that I have that liberty in this particular instance, so I won't bother to do that. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm not going to add all the details that I added to the number. Again, the number is the flex of the design. And so I'm not trying to make every single thing the exact same, but I am matching the brand. And the brand is the blue, the pink, the white, all together in one form or another, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put a small drop shadow on this guy. So we'll go to Effect, Path, Effect, Stylize, Drop Shadow, and we'll hit OK, like that. And I actually like it. That's fine, I think. It does kind of create a lot of little shapes here that are a little bit unnecessary, but it does bring in a little bit of thickness. We could try this, kind of like that. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. You kind of get the idea there. And then last but not least, we're going to bring it all in and together with this light gray that we have here. So I'm just going to duplicate this here. The shadow's already there. The offset path is already there, but I just had to offset it one more time. And then in this case, I'm going to do 2.5 pixels. Now, I don't ever care if all of my outlines match each other in width, but when the final outline, if they're all the same color, so in this instance, we're doing the light gray. If the final outline, I do like them to match in width. So let's see here. And then we'll turn the drop shadow the same. You know what I got to do? I'm just going to name that just so I have it there. So like, see, it's got that random name. So I'm just going to call it silver. And I know it's not silver, but I'm going to call it silver. Then I can get to it in the drop shadow settings easily. Color swatches. And then all I got to do in here is type silver. There it is. Okay, and click OK. And see the drop shadow, well, that should come out. Let me see what we got going on here. Oh, I got it turned off. All right, something's weird's going on here. Do this. I know. Oh, I guess it is right. What am I doing? Okay, so that is all right. And so we're just doing I don't know why my brain got thrown off right there. Okay, so see this outline here? I want this one to match. Now I don't know what my actual width is here because if I was on a regular build, I would know like, oh, that's 1.5 inches, that's 2 inches, this is 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch, so this therefore is 1/2 inch or whatever. And then I would know, okay, I got to do my math, come in, give my outline. And I'm not going to do all that right now. I'm just going to go through by eye and just make it look the same. So we're going to just adjust it like that. I think that looks pretty close. There we go. Okay, so now you can see kind of the same build. And I'm going to show you one more little trick to help that sponsor along just a little bit. Okay. Now, in this particular instance, lots of different letters going on, lots of little shapes. You can't just consider when you're typing something or creating a sponsor, it's not just about like the letter itself. It's about all the little shapes that are created in between the letters. Those are shapes too, and your eye is going to be drawn to those as well. So we're making sure that the eye is drawn to this. Okay, so in this particular instance, because it's so small, I don't need it to have all of this on there. Like that's a lot of outlines, drop shadows. You know, even if I scaled it down, you know, if I took it, scaled it way down to be almost the same size as the other one, and dropped it in here, and then popped it on here, like that's still a lot. And it's kind of unnecessary. It's like it's an overdose of like what we actually have going on. So I don't need all that. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my appearance, and I'm just going to simply turn it the dark blue color, right? And then because it's so small, it doesn't need all of those details. And now it's going to be a lot more readable. And I'm going to make it larger like that. And if you want to scale your stuff without the sizes of your strokes and outlines scaling, you just go to your preferences. And then you turn off scale strokes and effects. And now when I scale this down, like it keeps all the same measurements on that stuff. So if I got to make a small tweak, I'm not tweaking the sponsor outlines because I have my measurements set the way I want, right? So I can tweak this without compromising my measurements. I typically don't turn those off. I typically build and leave. Anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead go ahead and kind of size this up, size this guy down just a little bit, bring him up closer to the top, gives more breathing room to my contingencies and my graphic. And then I think I'm just gonna pop that little that silver outline on there. And again, for consistency's sake, we'll go 0.5. And there we go. And that one probably doesn't even need to be as thick as the other one. Like that. And then what I like to do is come in, and I don't mind if these are touching, but they might as well share, right? Like instead of doubling up, might as well just bring it in and share. So now those are overlapping on top of each other. As long as it's not creating anything weird, I don't mind that. And then I typically go to the flattest point, the start of the flattest point at the bottom, the start of the flattest point. You could do it either way. I could bring these guides out to here, and then I size it to match that and to match that. I'm going to leave that little point out there and use the number. So there you go. And see, now all of that looks pretty intentional, right? So I'll group that together, leave it as is. Now I can take this guy, let's delete that, and I'm going to ungroup. And then I can just scale. So I'm going to go to Preferences, General, and I'm going to turn my scale strokes effects back on. And then I'm going to scale this guy up, and I can drop that on here and then use it for this sponsor. Okay, but first let's just take a look at the difference in what we've created. See how that looks really blocky, kind of unnecessary. It's like, why the car might as well be blue in the background if you're going to do it that way, right? But it's not, it's gray. So you build in a way that keeps it loose, has space, but is also readable. Now the one thing I would fill in, because it's just not really necessary to have it here, is this D. That, and then I would just group that together, and then later when it's finalized I would set it all to one shape so it wouldn't be random block in there like that. And that kind of cleans it up just a little bit. If I got little spots like that are open, I like to close them up. I don't like to close everything up, but things that are like little holes and things like that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is the same with Truett's. We're going to just clean it up. Not just clean it up though. It's important that the size of it, right? Because this is probably the primary sponsor. They've probably paid the most money, have the most investment in the car. So in my eyes, that's always how it works. If you're on the right rear quarter panel, left rear quarter panel, you've probably given the most money. And so we need to straighten it out first. I always like my sponsors to be straight to start, and then I will rotate them later. Okay, so bring that up here. And this guy actually needs quite a bit of cleanup work. Because you can see the gaps between the letters they're just not consistent. And I'm going to do this by eye. I'm not going to get super meticulous on this. I usually do. Again, if I'm doing a real wrap design, I get really meticulous and I go through and I really make sure that everything is right. But I think you can get the basic idea by the way I'm doing it here in the video. And then I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to move it back. I'm going to align it. See this bottom corner here on the S? I'm going to align that there like that. Okay, so it has an alignment point and it looks intentional. You can see too that the brake and alignment is not rotated to the same as Truett's, which is, again, it's just another small inconsistency that doesn't help the design. And so we want that to be consistent all the way across. So we make that adjustment, okay? And then this white outline, again, it's making things bleed together, making things blob together like it's all one piece. It doesn't look crisp. It's not super readable. And so, and this is a nice loose font, meaning it's got a lot of space in between the letters. So there's a lot to work with here. But so if we build it right, we can make it look really readable while still matching the original brand that's set by the 7.9, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this white. So you can see here, look at how everything's like touching each other, right? So the big important thing to do here is to make sure that we have consistency between our letters. The most noticeable thing to me is the T's almost touching each other. And so in some cases, maybe you get away with that. It just depends. And this, I'm going to fix it now just because I just don't like it. So, and that's enough for me. If it offends my eye in a design, and when I say offends my eye, like every time I look at it, my eye's being drawn to the same spot as though it's problematic, then something needs to be done to fix it. That's just a rule of thumb. Fix it, right? Work on the thing that's sticking out to you most. It's just for any type of design, you know, remodeling a house. If your trim looks crooked, there's something wrong. Like you need to fix it. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead. And so I like kind of that gap there. So I'm going to, usually what I do is I'll take a block, that, and I would match that up. Because not in all cases does the distribute space evenly work, because there might be little points and things on one of the letters that will not allow it to distribute evenly. There'll be a big gapper between them. So it doesn't always work. Just depends on the font. So because this font, every letter is the same width, it will work. And I'll show you here in just a minute. Okay. So I'm going to use this for now just to create my consistent gaps. And again, I'm not going to nail it. I'm not going to get it perfect because I don't want to sit here for an hour moving a blocker on my screen and have you watch it on a video. So again, so I'm going to bring this over here and I'm going to bring this in, and you're going to see this point here almost touches, but it creates a consistency. Now, the funny thing is what happens is by eye is how this gap here, because it's long, it looks a little bit smaller than this one. And so by your eye, if that's offending your eye, open it up a little, give it the space that it needs, right? You got some wiggle room there is what I'm trying to say. Same thing here. It's going to happen here again, right? So we bring it in, and then we know, like, oh, if it's got that little point on it, I'm probably going to need like a little bit of a bigger block. So I'm going to go ahead and make a bigger block after I duplicate that one. That, Okay, bring that over here. Like that. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, oh my gosh, he is overdoing it. Like, this is too much. Listen, a letterhead or a sign painter is not going to think that perfecting your letters or getting them close to perfect. Actually, a letterhead would watch this and be like, what are you doing? So the reality is, though, is like if you're going to be a wrap designer and you're going to be a designer and like that's what you're aspiring to do, like be meticulous about what you do. You know, there's a reason why some guys stand out. It's because they're meticulous. They care about the little details. So you can see that kind of evens things out quite a bit, cleans things up quite a bit. It's not perfect. Again, I'm not going to sit here in this video and make it perfect. We know what we're aiming at. We could do better. And so this is clearly better than what we had before, much more consistent. And now I have a really good starting point for the sponsor. So I'll bring all that together, and I'm going to ungroup all these guys here. This K is 2 separate parts, so I'm going to weld those together real quick before I get started. But then just put a nice little space here, grab all of it, distribute evenly, and now you have even space between all of them, and it just makes it more readable. It's going to make it more readable, just that little bit of space. Okay, so then we'll back this guy off here, because and is a different word, and so is alignment, and we'll back this guy off here, and I want this space and this space to be the same. Again, I would really go through and probably make sure it was. Okay. Two, like even I was talking about the contrast on CJs. I like to do it with the word and also. Like instead of having break and alignment and just having it all be one block of text, I don't mind using a brush font to throw the and in there, and just it creates a little bit of contrast, right? To throw that in there. As long as it doesn't compromise the design. All right, I'm going to keep it the way that it is for now, just because this isn't my design, it's somebody else's. So I'm going to use what he has here. Okay. All right, so now I've got those two things pretty well straightened out. Now what I want to do is take CJ's, what I've got over here, and I want to apply it to this. So I'm going to take this and bring it down here. And I'm going to get it onto the rake the way that it belongs. And the nice thing about this sponsor that I like is that it could take up a lot of horizontal space because it's nice and thin. So it's not a blocky, like if it was a big square, it would only fit like on the rear quarter panel from here to here. I can't get it over here as well. Think of Nick Hoffman's dirt late model when he was sponsored by Marathon. He had the Marathon logo back here, and it was nice and big, but you can't take it and extend it over here. So in this case, this particular sponsor, bring it up, fill up the space, right? That's what they paid for. Build the space up. This is a 100-mile-an-hour billboard. Let's make it as functional as possible, and it brings the brand together. It makes the pieces come together. So I'm gonna go ahead and ungroup that, and then I'm gonna take this style because I'm lazy, and I'm gonna throw it over here. Make a duplicate of it, and then apply it here. Okay, and so now you can see I scaled it up from here and then drug it over here to do that. And you can see now the same style is on from here to over here, and the only thing I have to adjust is that final outline, because that's the one that I really care that matches exactly the other ones. So I'm going to nudge this down just a little bit so it's not going off the top. And then, forgot a piece. This guy here. Okay. But now there's a difference between Truett's and CJ's threads. Truett's is a lot less letters. The font is much bigger. So I could probably get away with going back to this brand and using pink numbers or pink letters instead of white ones. And so I'm going to turn that pink, and I'm going to turn this fill white. And I think that actually works. I could probably thicken up that white just a little bit by offsetting this path just a little more. So I'm going to go -1 pixel like that. You can see there, as long as I don't lose this up here, I think we're good to go. And then that really helps that sponsor stand out a lot more, but also match the number. The white might have been more readable. It's kind of a horse apiece. It's kind of like your decision how you're going to do it, but you got to make sure your build is solid in the first place. If it's not, then it doesn't really matter what you do, because you're building on top of stuff that isn't properly spaced, and things won't look right. So now, even with that space in there, look how much more readable that is. And with the white set to the inside instead of the outside. Set to the outside, it closed up all these gaps on the S, closed up the gaps on the R, made everything a lot tighter and more like a blob. So I'm going to take this guy here, the custom printing. I'm going to drop that on here, and I'm going to set that on there like that. And then we'll go ahead and move this down like so. And so I'm not going to move it up there where this is chomping into that blue. I want to bring it down, give it the space, and have it share, right? Have it share that line, that width. Okay, and then I can group these guys together. And I could add the inner shadow inside of that. I think there's probably not room. But you get the main idea there. Okay, so I'm going to group those guys together and then save that. And you kind of see, and you could, like, you don't, this doesn't have to be this big. This is just my preference. So like, you could bring it down a little bit, maybe give it a little bit of breathing room on that. So let's go to like that. Okay, and then I'm going to go back, preferences. Sometimes I blank out, like open up a menu and I'm like, what was I doing? All right, so now I want to work on the graphic and really get the graphic into a space that's going to be helpful for the design. And so one way you know you're doing something right is when you take the graphic away and everything still looks really solid and like decent on its own, right? And so, you know, if you take the graphic away and it's like, oh man, this thing is a bummer, like then the graphic probably ain't going to help it much, you know? And so I always like to make sure I'm working pretty solid, even without the graphic in there. Okay, so I'm going to first move the graphic up just a little bit. I don't like how it's kind of poking down here between this 7 and 9. You're not always going to be able to do that. I want to make sure I keep this point here. So I'm going to probably move this around, move that around like that. Just kind of play with it just a little bit here and there to make sure that it's not in weird places. Tilt it down just a little so that alignment. So yeah, I'm kind of like splitting hairs right now because I don't want this here, but I don't want that to touch that there, but I do want this up here. And so you just kind of got to play with it until everything lines up in the best possible scenario. And sometimes you just got to leave it as is, right? You're not going to be able to maybe get it right where you want it. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, I notice a lot of things going on inside this graphic that are not necessary. You can see all these like other outlines that are in the graphic, and that's because we have shapes stacked on top of shapes, and so that are identical, maybe different color but identical in size. And so we don't need those. So I'm going to delete that. Again, see, this is like under here. I'm going to delete that. Under, I'm going to delete it. Delete that. Again, we got a lot of things going on until I get to the space where it's nice and clean. Okay, I got that. That. See, I got this yellow piece in here. Get rid of that. And so you get another one. It's just keeping your files clean will help you in your attempt to have smaller file sizes, for one. And two, it just makes it easier to modify your art. You know, when you're going through, you want to be able to change stuff easily and not like work through a bunch of stuff that isn't unnecessary. I'm going to go ahead and adjust this down here. Just give it a little bit more space. I'm eyeballing that in. Kind of a drop shadow thing. Okay, so the first thing is that I'm not a huge fan of is the use of the light blue and how much light blue is being used. I don't mind that it's there, but it's actually just a little bit too much, and it's drawing a lot of attention to itself and then away from everything else. So what I want is actually the shape that is trapped inside of, not this guy. This guy, no. Let me zoom in. The shape trapped inside of this dark blue color here. And did I lock it? Must have. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that, and I'm going to release the path. Okay, so now I have that shape that's inside of that blue, and I can actually get rid of that, I think. Yep. And now I can change this to this color. No, this color. And then turn that other one back to the dark blue. So now I got a clean stack, right? It's like clean. Now I have, and what I mean by a clean stack is I have this. I'm going to ungroup that. I have this guy here on the bottom, then the light blue, then the drop shadows that were on the inside and cut. I'm going to bring all these together. And so what I want to do with this is I want to fade it. I'm going to take the light blue color, and I want to integrate the light blue, but I don't want the light blue to be so intense. So I'm going to go ahead, grab this gradient that I saved before, set it to 90, and see how it's going to work its way through the graphic. I'm going to actually hit G, which brings that up, and then I can adjust the gradient just a little bit, kind of play with that. And so then I end up with these little kisses of blue here at the top instead of just a whole graphic that's just one color, right? And so now what I'm going to do is come back down here, take a look at it. So I don't have enough back here. I got quite a bit up here, but I need a little bit more back here if I just want it to be consistent, right? So I'm going to have to tilt it back. Right? Ooh, I think I had it perfect right there. Right there. Pretty good. All right. And then with these drop shadows, instead of having them so harsh, I'm going to actually take them and I'm going to do the same thing, I think. I want to put this on here, 90. And then I'm going to actually, it'll be a gradient, but I'm going to have a gradient the same color. And then this is going to go down to 0 opacity. And then this will go up to 100 maybe. And so it ends up adding a nice subtle detail in there without it being overwhelming, right? So you can kind of see how it's coming together just a little bit there. And without creating a ton of extra contrast. And so now I'm going to do the same thing that I've been doing all along. I'm going to take this, I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to inset this one. And we're going to go -1 pixel. See how that looks. That, and I just want to set this to yellow just so I can see how wide I've done this now. I think that's a little too much. I'm going to go back to 0.5 pixels, turn this up to 100, like so. Oops. Oh, you got to make sure you have it selected, otherwise it ain't going to change anything. 0.5 pixels. My least favorite noise in the world is that noise that Illustrator's telling me something's open and needs to be clicked or something, you know. Okay, so now, oh, you know what I did? It's got to be that. There we go. All right, so I got that yellow in there, and I just want it to be the gradient. So I'm going to do that. Whoop. Like that. And I'm going to, let's see, what's this one set at? 91.8. So I'm going to set the other one to 91.8 so they're the same. Like that. And see how now they're stacked on top of each other. You can't see a difference, not yet. But when I start moving them around a little bit, this one specifically, It's going to start bringing some of that blue back in, which gives me a little bit more of that detail. It just brings that light blue in a way that isn't incredibly offensive to the eye. This dark blue here is getting thin back here, and I don't necessarily like that. So I'm going to thicken that up like that. Okay. And then we'll go to Object, Show All. Get that texture back in there. There we go. And now you can see we're kind of getting that light blue back in there without like competing with everything else that's going on. There's a kiss of it here. We got a kiss of it in the back. And I might take this, just maybe darken it up a little. So I'll turn it black and then pull back on it. Let's use a different black. Go with this guy. There we go. That. And like that. And we'll lighten that one up just a little bit more. There we go. So I actually don't like it darker. I actually like it lighter. So I'm going to go back to making it light. And maybe even lighter than what I've got up here. I think, yeah, that's better. And then I can lighten this one up too. But not a lot. It doesn't need to be a huge contrasty thing, right? Just give it some detail. Okay, like so. And so as long as I don't lose this sharp point, I don't mind if the other one gets lost behind the 7 and the 9 there. That's not a big deal to me. I would like it if the graphic didn't pop down here and create this little shape. I could fill that in with gray, could fill it in with white, make a little bit of an adjustment. I don't like squeezing if I don't have to, like that. Not a big fan of doing that if I don't have to. Again, if I had more time, I don't like making, I mean, the video's already long. I don't want to make it longer. I would pop something back here so that this doesn't pop through. I'd clean up this little area back here so that, you know, maybe the graphic, you know, I don't have to change it necessarily here. But if I just pull in a little bit, some of the stuff, especially the blue is the thing that's really actually sticking out quite a bit. But if I kind of what goes on behind the numbers isn't that big of a deal, as long as it doesn't really affect what's not going on behind the numbers, right? So like that. Like that. See how that just cleaned that up a lot more, right? Looks a lot more intentional. This right here is probably the biggest concern to me. I mean, I wouldn't say it's big, but just close it up, right? You don't need that in there. And that just makes things more solid. Okay, so go ahead and save that. And then as far as the graphic goes, he had this piece up here, right? And so we can get that back easily just by cutting up the graphic. And we don't have to duplicate the whole thing. I'm going to duplicate that because I might have another use for it. And then let's get our mask back. Let's turn it yellow so we can know what we're looking at here. And I'll select everything. Make clipping mask. There we go. You can see looks nice and clean. And then let me duplicate that. Like so. Oh, you know what? It's funny. That gray didn't go with it. So I'll do that. Oh, come on. Oh, that's why. Because it's locked. All right. There we go. Okay, so one other thing I would do. Sorry, I keep on flipping around there. One other thing that I would consider doing is bringing something down here onto the nose, only because it creates the complete look, right? And so that's why I saved this guy over here, which means we might have to come back and adjust our graphic. Because you don't want to put a nose graphic in that is gonna not flow with that graphic right there, right? And so the nose graphic should always be like something small. It gets ripped off pretty easy anyway. And so, you don't want to create something that wraps around way up to the front or whatever like that, but just something that kind of helps finish it out. And then you can make your clipping mask. That's what this piece, I built this piece here into the template for that reason. So you can see it kind of looks like it's probably breaking somewhere in here, the graphic does. And so I'd maybe take this graphic, tilt it down just a little bit to help it flow with that nose. I also want, I think, a little bit more space here, like that. In between the break and alignment. They just look like they were kind of crowding each other a little bit. Okay, and so now the graphic there is kind of crowding. There you go. And I think that looks pretty good. And depending on where the contingencies and things are going to go on the car, you're going to have space down here. You have space under the number. You have space on the rear quarter. You got space on the bottom of the sail panel. Maybe move down the CJ threads a little bit. Again, there's always little tweaks that I make. Sometimes what I like to do, and this is just an important tip, is like, I get done with a design, I'll walk away from it, thinking that it's good, or thinking, I just need to get fresh eyes on it later. And then I'll come back in and immediately see the thing that needs to be changed. It's just so much easier to see it after, you've kind of taken a break from it a little bit. And so just always keep that in mind as well. So I think that does it for the changes on this particular car. Feel free to give your feedback, what you think would work, what you think wouldn't work. Subscribe and like the video and help us to get more followers so we can make more content like this. If you guys have any questions, hit us up on the support page, srgfx.com/support.